Good morning, everyone. On behalf of EUROCONTROL, the European Commission, EASA, and CESAR joint undertaking, it is our pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on U-Space Lesson Learned. My name is Janusz Kovac, and I'll be your technical host for today, and as such, I will provide technical support to the speakers and the moderator in the delivery of this webinar. But before we start, allow me to brief you on some practicalities regarding this event. You might have noticed that you have a menu bar from which you can select the following features. Q&A. Please use this to ask content-related questions at all times. These questions will be answered by the presenters at the end of the webinar. Your questions and name will be visible to other participants. If you don't want that, please make your questions anonymous. Chat. For all other questions that are not content-related, suggestions, technical issues, or just to say hello, you can use the chat. Feedback. At the end of the webinar, you will be invited to provide feedback to us. The video of the presenter. In this webinar, you will see the presenter at all times while he's going to share the slides. I have the pleasure now to hand over to Munish, the moderator of this webinar.
Thank you. Thank you, Janos, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first webinar of 2022, hosted by the European Network of U-Space Stakeholders. Whilst we're doing this, a poll is going to get activated, and you should see that on your screen. I think you do it now. Would you be kind enough to indicate which organization you represent and what your role is? It will simply help us to understand who's logged in, and so that we can then try and ensure that our topics and questions that we obtain from all of you, we answer them accordingly to ensure that we cover at least all those people from the organizations who are logged in, but also go wider than that. So we'll run this poll for maybe another second or two, and then we'll see the results. While you're doing that, I'll set the scene. With the U-Space regulation released by EASA and the European Commission in April of 2021, the European Union is now on a fast course to implementing U-Space. However, based on what we see at EUROCONTROL and our partners, different members of the European Union are operating at different pace. So there's a different level of maturity as such. Not surprising, of course. There are those that are mature and those who are still trying to get to that stage. Our job in the European network of U-Space stakeholders, our objective, is to help you all to share lessons with you about transitioning from what used to be demonstrations of U-Space to implementations. And we tend to go beyond just the regulatory matters. We would look at the technical matters, operational, societal, the need for standards, and so on and so forth. And the way we do it is by inviting some members of our network to share their lessons with you, and then to give you an opportunity to ask questions and have a dialogue with them. Now, before we get into introducing the speakers, a quick announcement to all of you. This is our first webinar for 2022, but on the 28th of March of this year, we will be holding our first physical meeting, well, since pre-COVID days, at the Amsterdam Drone Week venue, which is the Amsterdam Rai in the Netherlands. The Amsterdam Drone Week starts from the 29th and runs until 31st, and which is Tuesday to Thursday. But on the Monday, the 28th, we will be holding our first physical meeting for the members of the network. The meeting will be held from 2 to 5, so it's an afternoon one. And in due course of time, we'll be sending you invitation for that. The invitation will go out to the members of the network. And we have negotiated with the Amsterdam Drone Week organizers a limited number of free tickets, which will allow you all access to the entire week of that Amsterdam Drone Week thing. So a quick announcement. So please look out for the email invitation from our side, and please do register as soon as possible, because there'll be limited tickets to attend the complete week of the Amsterdam Drone. I think we've got a number of people who have attended and who have participated, and I can see that the biggest category that we have on the screen, we have a very high number of people from ANSPs and airports, but equally it's very comforting to know that we have a large number of people from U-Space service provider community, U-Space platform developers, but also the drone operators as well as the drone pilots. So we have a good cross-section of people who are participating. So thank you for taking the poll. It gives us an idea now to who's on the other side. I can tell you that we've had over 400 registrations, so I expect many questions to come later on. Now, let's move on. So to next slide, please, if I may, Janos. Let me now just set the scene in terms of who we've got today. We have three fantastic speakers who are going to address three very important aspects of U-Space implementation. One aspect is about integrating the U-Space in the airspace and a view from a Finnish ANSP. The other one is a very interesting methodology proposed by the Swiss FOCA, the regulatory body, to use automated means to monitor the USSPs that are certified to deliver services. Last but not least, an extremely interesting and thought-provoking lessons learned from our friends in HHLA Sky, the Hamburger Hafen and Logistics Sky division, where they will focus on lessons they've learned on how best to use operational control centers, particularly in this case at the port of Hamburg, to control and manage drones and many drones from there. So the first speaker from our side is going to be Benoit Curdy. Benoit is head of the strategy and innovation unit at Swiss Federal Office of Civil Aviation, FOCA. In his role, he oversees the implementation of U-Space regulation in Switzerland. Before joining FOCA in 2019, Benoit was the General Secretary of Global UTM Association, also known as GUTMA. I think for people involved in the U-Space world, Benoit is no stranger. They know him. So I'd like to invite Benoit to kick off with your presentation and share with us your proposal from Switzerland. Over to you, Benoit.
Well, thanks a lot, Munish. And yeah, I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. It's very exciting to be here. Really happy to have the opportunity to share some of the work we have been doing in Switzerland. As you might know, we've been very busy implementing the U-Space regulation already for a couple of years through an activity called SUSI, Swiss U-Space Implementation Partnership. And yeah, we have some ideas. It's all work in progress. And so it's that important to meet with you all who are innovators, who are at the front of making U-Space a reality. So thank you for the opportunity. And yeah, please give us feedback. It's, as I mentioned, we don't have all the answers yet, but we have some ideas that you would like to share with this group. So indeed, I'm going to give you, of course, an authority point of view on how we're going to deal with U-Space. So maybe the first thing when we think about U-Space and our relation with service providers is that there are two ways for you as a USSP to get certified. One is to go to a member state, so that would be us, and that's why we're involved, or through EASA. And today, although on the website, the name was focused on certification, I'm not really going to talk about the certification itself, because if you look at Article 15, which is how you get the certificate, this is actually something that we know how to do. It is very similar to what we do for ANSPs. So internally, it's not like we have a huge challenge regarding the certification itself. We have, however, a few tasks that are required by the regulation as an authority. And this is really not only, but there's a lot of requirements around data exchange, information, and monitoring the exchange of information. And this is fairly new. It's not something that I can go to somebody internally and say, hey, by the way, we need to do that and just add it to the list of your usual activities. It is something that we have to figure out how to do with limited resources. We're all in the same boat. We're not going to be able to add an infinite number of staff to deal with that. So we have to do with a very limited budget in terms of people and time. And so we have to be very mindful of how we're going to tackle this in an open market, right? We will have many USSPs. And for Switzerland, we're still a small country, so we will have far less than some of the larger countries. And so to sum up, right, certification is business as usual. It is valid across all EASA member states once you do it. But then this oversight, the onboarding and oversight, is where we see something we'd like to discuss, and we want to get to harmonization. And so to sum up, right, I think it's good to have a diagram to explain our view. So as we said, you want to be a USSP, you apply to either EASA or to a member state like ourselves. We do the certification. All right, it's not going to be done in a week, but we know how to do it. And then your certification is valid in all member states. So you don't have to worry about that. And this is in itself already very powerful. But now this is where, the challenges we think will start. You will report, say, hey, come to us and say, oh, by the way, I want to start operation in Switzerland, in France, in Germany, in Spain, in Luxembourg, And so you will have to do it for each member state. And each member state will do their own process. And so this in particular means signing an agreement among USSP for data exchange. You have to have an agreement with the ANSP, which is also very important. So you get the right data and they get the right data. And also there will be other documents that you will have to sign. For instance, how do you access the CIS? Or maybe there will be still other requirements from the member state. For instance, and this could be very particular to Switzerland, we will run an authorization server, which will give you token to access the network. I won't go into technical details. However, you will have to get an agreement with us regarding how this happens. And this in particular will allow you to give you access to a staging environment and then a production environment. Again, this is not the point of today, but just to give you an idea of, it's not as simple as you say, hey, by the way, I'm certified. Tomorrow, I want to start operating in Switzerland, and the next day, you'll be operating in Switzerland, right? And then once you have done all of that, then the oversight starts. So there are ways to harmonize. If we think about the legal templates, well, the legal side, we have templates that we can use. And by the way, you can see some of what work on the website susi.swiss, SUSI.swiss. Where we have already a legal agreement, we call it the master agreement for network remote ID. So you can have a look at that if you want. But today, what I would like to discuss is how do we harmonize the oversight? So how do I know as an authority that you are performing as required? If you try to do it the same way you've been dealing with traditional aviation, usually you have one ANSP, maybe two that you have to oversee. It's very different when you have a large amount of USSPs. And in particular, we need to think about who we are overseeing. And the life in which a USSP lives is very dynamic. It's an IT world where there's a constant amount of changes going, where you develop, you test, you push, and you might push several times a day if you're very dynamic. So of course, we're not going as an authority be able to monitor you or to give you an approval every time you make a change. It's far too dynamic. So we have to think about a new way of doing the oversight. And the challenge, again, keep in mind, we have to do it in a way that is harmonized across Europe. It's impossible that each of us do it in a different way. Imagine how time-consuming and difficult it would get for USSPs, and that would lead to huge fragmentation. So with that in mind, the only solution is to automate the oversight process. And so I'm not going to read all the reasons why we think it's important to automate. We've done already, by the way, the work manually, right? We've been through that for network remote ID and flight authorization. The manual, looking at the system manually is incredibly hard. For instance, we were barely able to define the root cause of an issue because you just see the end result, right? You don't have access to the back end. And so the debugging takes a lot of time. This is one of the reasons why, you have to have better systems. But also there are other reasons, just it doesn't work in terms of staff and you can only do it every so often. So again, it doesn't work to do it manually. So with that, what happens once you know that it has to be done automatically? Well, there's a solution that we've been using. And I'm going to give you here the example of network remote ID. So I hope you're familiar with the use-based regulation. I think you are, in this company. I'm not going to explain network remote ID. But basically what happens is that we have an infrastructure, which is code, right? Don't think about infrastructure as something crazy or hard. It's a code that allows us to generate flight path. So we tell you a USSP, this is where we expect flights to happen. Then as a USSP, you simulate those flights. We don't need real data, you simulate them. And then at the other end, we get back the results and we match with the expected path. And of course, we expect one-on-one accuracy so that exactly what has been generated will be what we retrieve. And here maybe, I say we, but that's where we need to be maybe a bit more precise. Actually, we as FOCA don't need to be involved in any of that because this is an open source code that actually you as a USSP can use and run yourself. And whenever we need information, then we will go back and look at the fact that you've done the test yourself, look at your logs, make sure that this happened. And with that, we have all the necessary proof that you reach the level that you need to reach. And you have all the confidence that you meet it, right? Because that's also the issue. How do I know that I'm meeting the expectations? Well, here you have a tool. You run it, and you can run it as often as we tell you to do, or as often as you wish to do. Log everything, and whenever something happens, you should be able to debug much more, easily. So again, this is a quick oversight. There's a code. You can go on GitHub and look at it. And we think that it's the best of two worlds because there are a lot of benefits for USSPs to do it that way. Especially it is something that will be familiar to people in IT, right? This idea of having kind of a test suite that you run before deploying your code is something that is adapted to our audience. And that is already very important. And in particular also, something that is important to us, whenever there's a change to the system, you can upgrade easily. This means that imagine there's a new standard, or imagine there's something that as USSP, you agree to change. Then you can make sure you have a new test suite that is adapted to that. And when everybody passes, you can immediately switch. So change management is also very important in that aspect. And so for USSP, it provides not only insurance that you're there where you need to be whenever you need to be. And of course, for authorities, there's also a lot of advantages. And that's why we're involved, right? We're involved because we need to deal with this issue ourselves. And in particular for us is that, once you're certified, we will have a high level of trust in you. I think this is something that is important. We don't want to be looking over your shoulder all the time. If we certify, it's because we think, and once you certify, we know that you're able to meet the requirements. And that is what we do with the NSPs already, right? And so then we have a tool in common where we understand and agree that if you use it, well, not only we trust you, but we know that if anything happens, we have a way to discuss what happened. You know, the goal is really to be able to have meaningful discussion and to make sure the network is going well. So to give you an idea, this is already being used in Switzerland for network remote ID. We have at the moment only one company using it fully, but it's been tested at a larger scale. Network remote ID is running in Switzerland, but on a voluntary basis, so it's not yet fully deployed as a use-based regulation. But we have significant experience, let's say, with network remote ID. And we're doing the same kind of approach now for flight authorization. And the reason why we start with those two services, of course, those are the services that require most data exchange among USSPs. And that's why we wanted them to be first. But geo-awareness will also require exchange between CIS and the CIS provider or providers and USSPs. And there will also be data exchange in traffic information. So we will use the same approach for everything. So last but not least, as we're getting to the end of this presentation, you can find more information on the code I mentioned and the inter-USS platform where you have the link here. What's important here, of course, is that when you talk about open source, you need to understand the governance structure. It has to be very solid. And that's why for us, it was important that this code is hosted by the Linux Foundation, which is, no question, the best place for a large open source projects. They have very solid, very sound governance for any of the projects that they manage. And so that was also for us something that was important and I wanted to mention today. So yeah, with that, that's it. Back to you, Munish.
Thank you, Benoit. Thank you for a wonderful proposal from our Swiss colleagues. And I can tell you this is not the last we've heard about it, because I think that we as a community, moving forward, we need to take a look at what the Swiss have done and perhaps complement this to try and bring together the various aspects to create a European level oversight, an automated oversight framework, which, as Benoit highlighted, increases efficiency and reduces errors, and really the way to go to make it more practical and common sense based. So thank you, Benoit, and thanks for your presentation. With that, we move on to our next speaker. My next speaker is Pasi Nikama. Pasi works as a senior vice president in Fintraffic Air Navigation Services Limited, that's the Finnish ANSP, taking care of marketing and customer relations. Now, he has a long history in the air traffic management and ATC world, going back to 1991, when he started his career in aviation. Pasi has been involved in various projects, both in management positions and also in ATCO positions. In fact, he still holds the ATM license, which is valid for the Area Control Center. Currently, though, Pasi is leading Fintraffic's ANS digitalization project with the UTM involvement. Without taking the thunder away from you, Pasi, but I really feel that the presentation that we're about to see now is one where the ANSPs need to see how Finland is taking the integration of UTM and drones in the airspace. So over to you, Pasi. Please share your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Munish, and good morning and good day for everyone joining this event. I hope you can see my presentation now. So I'll go through a little bit on what we are doing already. So as Munish...
I don't think your presentation is visible just yet, Pasi. You may want to share it.
All right, I tried to, but let me see again. Just a minute.
Would you please press the green button?
Yeah. So can you see it now?
If you can put that in the running mode. slideshow mode, please, Pasi.
Yes, I will. Yeah, how about now?
We see the slide sorter. So would you please?
It's the same problem then.
Yes, exactly.
Let me see. Still not?
Not yet.
All right. The digitalization is something little different sometimes, so difficult.
Pasi, why don't you go to the first slide and then just run through it, even in the normal mode, even if it's not the slideshow mode.
Yeah, there's something. I'll open it again, just a sec. I have to speak a little bit with more speed. And then we'll try once more. If not, then I'll have to rely on your expertise in this one.
Bingo.
All right, eventually. So
Yes.
I'll skip the formal part and just, start with saying, so I present the air navigation service provider in Finland. We have been doing this digitalization project for a couple of years now. We are having already the drone operator registration in Finland, so the CAA Traficom is owning the register itself, but we introduced the platform or the way how to register in the system. We have information for drone flyers and also some flight approval applications for areas where those applications and approvals are needed. We are aiming for the aeronautical digitalization to give the information digitally from one source so that everyone can have very easy access on the information, also aiming for digital briefing facility services for both manned and unmanned traffic. And the digital environment where we can deliver top quality information to our inner and outer customers. So not only for all the airspace users, but also inside the company itself. Benefit, of course, is better user experience. We wish to enable the drone traffic flow in Finland from our side and also create conditions for manned and unmanned traffic integration where we can. And with this, I'm giving you the, if I can change the slide. For some reason, it's not going forward. All right, here we go. So we are having a Trollo project in Finland. It's a quite a big one. There's a definition on the project to enable automated, secure, and scalable drone systems, products, services to support future drone application, as well to establish a Finnish Trollo innovation and business ecosystem to accelerate development and secure competitive advantage. So quite ambitious project. From our side, it concentrates, as we are an ANSP, it concentrates highly on how we can integrate manned and unmanned traffic in controlled airspace, but also in uncontrolled airspace. We have quite many participants in the project, 3 research organizations, VTT, which is the Finnish government-owned innovation research center, Finnish Meteorological Institution, and Aalto University involved. We have several companies as we, of course, and then Nokia, Tactotech, Insta, Fleetonomy, Securitas, Portfolio, Mediatek, and Skydata. So companies that are working in telecommunication or in digitalization or around the drones, drone operators or etc. And also we have several supporters and facilitation companies, Finavia as the main airport operator in Finland, Elisa as telecom operator, the city of Oulu, Hailuoto community, Avartec, etc. The integration of ATM and UTM, as we all know, is a little bit challenging task. So we are starting this at Oulu area. Oulu is a city up in the north in Finland, and the Oulu city was taken into this project because we have the Oulu city area, Oulu harbor area, and the airport area quite near to each other. At the airport we have, of course, the civilian traffic, commercial traffic, but there's also a military traffic. They have their own base at Oulu airport. We have border guard helicopter operations, but also Finhem, so the Medhel operations, and also parachute jumpers operating at the airport, and of course the Vfr traffic. And then we have outside the mainland, we have the Hailuoto island, quite a big one. They have the ferry connection to the mainland. So there's really a business case on thinking how to deliver goods or medicine, etc. with the drones as you are situated away from the mainland. During the project, we have picked up 4 different cases. So we wish to build up drone corridors, one from Hailuoto Health Center to Oulu University Hospital in the mainland. This is partly in uncontrolled and in controlled airspace, so combining both of the airspaces. And then from the Oulu city center to Oulu airport, one corridor, which is inside the controlled airspace. And then also from Oulu University warehouse, east from the airport to the Hailuoto Health Center. So then we have a drone corridor via the airport. And then outside the controlled space from VTT Research Center to the IDEA Park retail park, which is totally in uncontrolled airspace. So with this, we are trying to figure out and set up the scene for all kind of airspaces and combinations of those. From my point of view, the research problem, if you think on the airspace and how to use the airspace and give space also for unmanned and manned traffic, is that is there really a possibility to operate both of those operations at the same time in controlled airspace? And how to inform traffic, the unmanned and manned traffic in uncontrolled airspace, as we have the VTT and IDEA Park short track just outside the CTR. And then one really interesting topic is what kind of segregation is then needed. We created some business cases around the corridors. So one very clear one is from Hailuoto Health Center to Oulu University Hospital. So they are almost daily taking medicine or the examples from the health center to Oulu University Hospital by car. So driving to the ferry from the health center, and then 30 minutes across the bay, and then driving via the Oulu, where the airport lies, to the Oulu city center. That's back and forth, minimum 3, maximum maybe 4 to 5 hours, depending on the traffic and the weather conditions, etc. So it really has a tremendous business case on seeing how fast and how easily could be deliver those medicine examples, etc., via air and via drones. Also, from Oulu University warehouse, which was in the east side of the airport, taking medical accessories to the High-North Health Center. Again, if you are taking those by car, it will take you 2.5 to 3.5 hours. And by drone, maybe 35 minutes only. Then from Oulu city center to Oulu airport, maybe in the future they have some fast delivery of goods and mail between the sites. And from in uncontrolled airspace to VTT, Idea Park, Retail Park, just trying to figure out how short distance delivery could be done. In a picture you can see this is taking from the Finnair aircraft when I departed from Oulu towards Helsinki in January. So there you can see that when you have the very rough and icy conditions, so the ferry connection might be even delayed or cancelled for some occasions. So then the high water island is really isolated or needs a helicopter or drone services. The main challenge for me is the segregation. So how can you keep the distance good enough from drones to the manned traffic? In regulation, we know that the VFR must maintain 500 feet from sea or ground. And in the previous picture, we saw that I'll take you back there, actually here. So you can see that there are VFR entry exit points, 4 of those in Oulu CTR. So in those, the maximum altitude for VFR is 1,300 feet, but there is no minimum altitude for those. But with the flight rules, we know that the VFR must maintain at least 500 feet. So if we take a drone corridor and as a use space airspace 120 meters, so that makes something like 400 feet. If the drone corridor is up to 400 feet and the VFR plane maintains at least 500 feet, there we have a segregation, it's 100 feet. Why is it enough? This is the real question. Then we have the VFR holding altitude, both north and south holding from 700 to 1,000 feet at all airports. So as an air traffic controller, I could give information or clearance to the incoming VFR traffic that maintain at least 700 feet, join north holding via the Tusky VFR entry point from the north. Then we have 300 feet between the drone corridor maximum level and incoming VFR traffic. So 300 feet, 100 feet, which one is the better one or the good one or good enough? So this is something where we also used to a little bit challenge the CAA to give their insight on this one. If we think on IFR traffic, of course, if we have departing IFR traffic on that side of an airport, you can't really have any drone corridors active until the IFR departure aircraft is high enough. But if you have an incoming IFR, we have an IFR holding altitude 2,300 feet for runway 12, and the final approach fix, still the altitude is 1,700 feet. So that versus our drone corridor 400 feet, we have still 1,300 feet in between. But how close can the drone corridor be so that there is segregation good enough between the arriving IFR traffic and the drone corridor below the arrival slope.
2 more minutes, Pasi.
Yes, thank you. I will carry on with the last slide. So one thing also, if you need to publish those corridors so that everyone can see those, so the VFR pilots and other drone pilots, drone operators. So if we need to publish the drone corridor points so that everyone can see those and detect where the corridors are, what is the relevance for the drone points? Can ICAO really provide so many new points from the database? Are we lacking of 5-digit names in a world if everyone will publish all the drone corridor points around the world? And then, of course, for the BVLOS flights, if we're going to fly those in populated areas, we need Sail 3 or 4 category drones, which are, I think, still not existing in Europe. So we have to have very capable drone operators also. And then again, drone corridors versus U-space airspace. I think we have to start with the drone corridors, and when U-space regulation by 1st of January 23 comes alive, then and everyone or someone can apply for U-space airspace, then we can see that what's the difference. And of course, we need the social acceptance. People are complaining maybe on a noise. They are afraid of their privacy or safety. And I'm sure there will be also questions from the public that who really needs this kind of operations when you can drive with your car also. I know my time is ending, so thank you very much. And back to you, Munish.
Thank you, Pasi. Thank you very much. And thanks for sharing with us. I think you're on a journey, just like a number of other ANSPs. You're on a journey to implement U-Space. And at EUROCONTROL, we see different member states are taking different approaches. And I can see that in Finland, you're taking an approach where you're starting, you've dedicated a region of Oulu, and you're starting over there to try and implement U-Space and to integrate with the manned and unmanned flights over there. And I think from what I've learned and based on our discussions is that your approach is to get that right, learn from it, get that one province, one region right, and then you can roll out that approach in other parts of the country, because then you go from a more learned and more experienced and proven method to spread out to the rest of the country. So an interesting approach, and different countries are taking different approaches. And thanks for sharing your challenges. I understand you're on a journey, so you don't have all the answers, but it's good to know and good to share with our members and what the challenges are today, what the questions that we need to answer, some for which you've shared your ideas about answering them, but a number of other questions that we need to share insights with our colleagues across Europe to learn from them. So thank you very much indeed for sharing your experiences. Okay, if you can unshare your presentation slide, and I'll introduce our last speaker. Our last speaker of the day is Thorsten Indra. Thorsten works as a project developer at the HHLA Sky. That's a subsidiary of Hamburg Hafen and Logistics AG. Having been professionally involved in commercial drones industry since 2015, Thorsten has piloted drones in challenging environments across Europe and the United States, and he's also supported and consulted various companies in the US world. Now, working at the intersection of technology, integration, regulation, strategy, optimization, and UTM, he currently helps clients to implement drones in their enterprise operations so they can improve their efficient operations. This is a very interesting presentation that Thorsten's going to start, where they've actually created an IoT framework, which as a solution provider, not as a service provider, but as a solution provider, helps the operational control center, particularly in Hamburg itself, to manage and control many drones that are then deployed to do all kinds of things, such as surveys and maintenance and activities of that nature. So with that in mind, over to you, Thorsten. Please share your slide and start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I want to share a little bit about the perspective of an operator, US operator. And yet, while on the one hand we are that, on the other hand we aren't, you'll become clearer as we go on here. And I want to share the benefits of having such an integrated control center in the context of UTM, or even without having UTM. And I want to set the scene a little bit first. When Hamburg Harbor is the third largest harbor in Europe, and Hamburg Harbor Logistics AG, or for short we call it HHLA, it runs many of the terminals, but is not the port authority, to be clear. So the terminals, they deal with containers, deal with ships, of course, with trains, with trucks, automobiles, fruit and coal, and bulk goods and whatnot. And so as such, HHLA Logistics is very good at connecting other streams of goods. Also manage a portion of real estate there, and have activities across the whole of Europe, especially Eastern Europe and as far as Caucasus. And with containers in particular, they've been a forerunner in automation. And so there are completely automated container terminals with AGVs and ships unloading and all of that. So the company HHLA is owned by 2/3 by the city of Hamburg, and HHLA Sky in turn is a 100% subsidiary of HHLA. So that kind of gives you the scene of where we're coming from. This is our origins. When you look at a port as such, and want to, or you have to do business there and have to do things, the nature of a port, of course, is having lots of waterways, and still there's stuff that needs to be delivered and things that need to be inspected. Areas need to be monitored, and you need a situational overview in emergencies, for example, and a whole lot more. And if you do this by hand, by car, by foot, or from a boat, that has, of course, its limitations, and things become slow, dangerous, or inefficient to one degree or another. And the same goes actually for many other large facilities. And on a side note, like I said, we're not a service provider, but instead we've created an end-to-end solution to deploy drones in industrial settings like that. And we do provide, however, some services within the harbor that's primarily to refine our products, though, just to give you the bearings there. So back to the issue at hand, when drones came on the horizons, it was thought about, well, how can they be put to use? And it became clear that this really promised to be a better way to address some of these challenges. But it's obvious if you use a one-to-one relationship, one pilot, one drone, that just wasn't going to cut it. And also VLOS has simply too many limitations when it comes to such extensive facilities. And so with all the available experience about the benefits of an automated processes, such as managing entire container terminals highly automatically, then it was a kind of a natural progression to also apply this principle to drones. And that's exactly what was done here. So an integrated control center was conceptualized and engineered here in Hamburg. And that was done in close concert with multi-purpose drone hardware, which then can serve a variety of use cases to address some of these things I mentioned earlier. And really, as Munish mentioned, it's an IoT platform, which puts the one using it in a very good position and is ready for expansion in the future to scale. So with Hamburg Harbor being critical infrastructure, there is a considerable burden to design systems that they don't fail or don't cause harm or damage. That's just not acceptable. And so the same high standards that goes also for the personnel using the equipment, the processes around it, not just hard and software items. And so what are the benefits? If you say, look, we want to deploy drones and this is how we're going to go about it. Well, from a customer's perspective, what it comes down to is an enterprise user that can plan, manage, and monitor and control 100+ drones from this command center. And all of that in a fully secure and an auditable way. Then, because it's an end-to-end solution, it really covers everything from asset management, maintenance, planning, scheduling, situational overview, operations, tracking, analysis, integration of other sensor networks, you can connect to other systems, aeronautical weather, and more of that in the pipeline. So that's where things really become efficient and safe. And then additionally, when you enable BVLOS flights by using mobile networks, it also means we have full controls over the drones. We receive data from onboard cameras, as well as payload sensors, whichever the use case may be. So these are some of the things that a customer is looking for. You know, I'm in talks with many customers, and so we are very close to what the industry is looking for. And that's also in early 2020, that system was not only supporting HHLA itself, so Hamburg Harbor Logistics AG, with the first use cases in the harbor, which made for a very good testing ground, but has since been soft launched and been made available to other select partners and clients. They come from large infrastructure, from ports, they have security tasks or chemical plants, oil plants, these kind of large facilities. And beyond Europe, we have sales and installations in both in Asia and North America, and also in discussions with a variety of industries to really put this end-to-end system for use, for good use, for the good of society. In doing that, we have also started partnering with people that understand and share our vision. And so we have Aero Robotics. Some of you may have read about that. They build very advanced long-endurance gyrocopters. They'll be benefiting from our control center, and then Aero's automation. They are very well recognized for their vision-based detect and avoid system, both in drones, but also in manned aviation. And they also have a ground module, which is being integrated has been integrated for them, as a matter of fact, recently in our control center. And that is to aid in deconfliction of manned traffic. And then recently we announced also a technology partnership with the Hamburg Port Authority, which the port at large. And there the intent is to use it in situations like emergencies, accident, any kind of disruptions, to get a good situational overview, and for inspection tasks and maintenance or expansion of port infrastructure, these kinds of things. And just to be sure, this is not just a lofty concept vision with a few screenshots, but this is a fully functional productive system, which is running and taking through the paces. And that's why it's also been recognized by the German Innovation Award in 2021. That was awarded by a distinct panel of experts that really dug deep, and we're delighted to have been awarded that. So then if we look at control center and benefits of that, we realize that U-Space is still new. It's a concept in the making. It's not been deployed as such, as we all know. This is going to start hopefully in early 2023. That's the target. But until then, there are many situations and countries that where there is no U-Space yet. And so, but all of these benefits of a control center, they are also possible without U-Space. And so when you look at managing no-fly zones or exclusion zones, which most critical infrastructures will have them, they get taken into account in our planning or scheduling. Then authorization processes, we apply a 4I principle to make things secure, to safeguard against other kinds of influences. The entire process becomes auditable, and reporting is goes throughout all processes. That way you can avoid unauthorized flying. And also you coordinate with other stakeholders of your industry, of your entire facility, which is often needed as well. Then we have integrated sensor networks, which can be seen either in the overview dashboard that we have for BVLOS for somebody needing an overview, or even in the planning and the controlling as well. And of course, that gives you a good overview for your own ops, but it also can show uncooperative traffic. And we've integrated services such as weather and tracking, of course, and controlling. And so in a sense, we also have a conformance monitoring possibility there as well. And much, much more, which are catered to the needs of an enterprise and or state clients. And with all of that, we have a full service offering that are all geared towards optimizing all workflows that are needed when you want to use drones professionally or commercially. So what does it all have to do with UTM? Well, as I mentioned, the control center can be viewed on its own and can be used as that. But of course, we are also looking to interface with UTM. We are in a setting in Hamburg where we have the Airbus Airbus airport in close proximity, as well as the International Airport of Hamburg. We have low-flying emergency helicopters and state aircraft missions, and as all of that makes it a challenging environment. Yet we are set up to operate commercially and bring benefits to our clients. So to efficiently manage BVLOS missions, it becomes essential to have a control center. Now, when you enter U-Space into that picture and the regulation 664 and the ones accompanying that, that really shifts things in a way that we've looked at for quite a while, because we are part of a German government co-funded project that's called UDVO, where for about the past 2 years, we have, together with a diverse range of partners, we've explored the implications of U-Space from all perspectives. We've looked at legal things, at operational, technically, practically, from both drones and manned aviation perspective. We've done this very holistically. We've had many stakeholder interviews and been doing a lot of research that's been very beneficial to dig deep there into the core issues. Then a prototype control center of a USSP was built, which enables, for example, a city to run a U-Space and then to authorize, manage, and track flights, manage geographical zones, also dynamic ones. And all of that is according to up-to-date legislative requirements from the EU. And how all of this can work in close concert with the tight integration, that's what I want to illustrate in a brief video clip. So if I click here, it should play. I'm gonna play. And so that all starts with, yeah, here it goes. It starts with flight planning. And then as the mission is scheduled, complete with all route data and geofence and timings, the approval request is then sent to the USSP. So you see both, yeah? You see the control center and the approval request. Here's where the timing and the scheduling is taking place. USSP can then review and approve the mission requested or rejected. And in early implementation stages, we do see, I'm going to pause this for a second here, we do see that there's going to be a human in the loop, because also our other approach to the entire control center is really a risk-based, a risk-balanced automated approach. So that's why we do see a human in the loop. Of course, all of this can be automated, but in early stages, we see a combination until much of the processes have been found out in larger practice, in larger numbers, and then things can be switched over to more automation. But back to this demonstration, it was also run on social media. You may have seen it before. We introduced it at the ITS World Congress recently in last fall. And so the drone then is ready to go. Where are we? Forward a bit. The mission is approved. The approval is sent over. The control center receives the approval. The drone is then readied. The checklist has gone through, and after the checklist is completed, the activation request is sent. Then back at the USSP, the flight is activated. And if there's no factor, flight is authorized, sent back to the control center. Tracking is possible in both the control center and the USSP. Flight has been monitored during the whole time in both instances. So on the bottom left, you've seen the control center, and the top right, you've seen the USSP. The drone carries out its mission. After it's done, the checklist has been completed again. The flight is completed on the USSP side as well. Then you can do post-processing of data. And all of that then leads to actionable data where somebody can make decisions and plan and do the things that whatever the client needs to do. And so partnering in that was the German Rail and the UDV project, as I mentioned, in Hala Sky. And beyond that, that's sort of wanted to give you a brief overview. Then what are some of the challenges when you think further towards UTM? This is, so I see industry as such, that's what I find in client talks with such enterprises, that they're ready for deployments. Now what, how do we go, where do we go, right? So we can see that, you can see in this tight integration that we fully embrace UTM in use space, and as part of this consortium, we see as a benefit, you don't have loss of data transmission, you don't do redundant entries, there's a seamless workflow, and part of the prototypes also includes the functionality of a single sys to give you the tools as to be working very efficiently. So what's still unsolved there is definitely the how does manned aviation communicate to USSPs, and how do you deal with tracking in airspace golf? This is one of the things. Then we're looking at space would be a good thing to have, test areas, you know, not just for a few weeks here, a few weeks there, to really say, okay, let's have a pilot and let's grow from there, where there may be protected areas, where there's simplified rules that are easy to use and sign up. Or I really see this good for states that have committed to a drone strategy, that want to go forward, where red tape is manageable and where there are low hurdles, where really more experience can be achieved. Then one goal of of course, we all have the goal of full integration, but for starters, it may really make sense to leave the low-level airspace for drones only. Otherwise, things might get too complicated. So this is still a work in progress, as we all know from various projects, but due to visibility changes, that might just make it a little bit easier in the beginning. Then common altitude reference system. I know there's an Icarus project that's working on that. That's one of the challenges as well. And all of that, we want to have cooperation. We, as drone, providers and as people know drones, we know where they are. We have full telemetry, we know always where they are. But when you bring in manned aviation, then things become a bit more challenging to have the same operational picture always, unless you're working in controlled airspace. And yeah, so there are still a bunch of challenges that need to be dealt with. We have some solutions in the works, and some of this we'll also look forward to hopefully presenting in the context in Amsterdam in a few weeks, possibly. So all of that, there are some small steps towards success, but in order to start somewhere, it's good to reduce complexity and not put all of this into the very same expectations as you have in something that's been developing over 100 years. So that was it from my side. Thank you very much, and we'll see if there are any more questions in the course. Thank you very much. Over to you, Munish.
Thank you, Thorsten. In fact, there are many questions. I was just reading on the screen as you were presenting, and I'd like to thank you, Thorsten, for a wonderful presentation, and actually also highlighting how not a service provider, but a IoT technology solution provider is adding value to at enterprise level, where the operations, particularly in this case from this control operations center, using IoT and other technology frameworks, it can help to manage not one, not two, but a whole fleet of drones, which would then go on and conduct inspections and surveys and what have you in the facility. We've only just looked at from the port perspective, but as Thorsten said, I think they're working with a number of other companies, and I can easily see the benefit of that, whether it's to go and inspect bridges or construction sites or nuclear power sites or other critical sites as well. So same argument applies. So thank you for that, Thorsten. And also thanks to all of you for registering your questions. A number of them have come through. In fact, I've lost count now of how many. I think you can see the questions on the screen. And they are addressed to all three speakers. So we've got about 20 minutes to have this Q&A session, and then we'll do the wrap up. So let's kick it off straight away. First of all, I think I'd like to address some questions to Benoit as he first presented his presentation. There's one from Angela from DFS. And that I think is similar to what Angela and Henk from NLR is asking. I think the question is all to do with the fact that there is an automated process, Benoit, no doubt. But will that process be available for oversight purposes, even including ANSPs? or will it just be with the CAA as well only, and no visibility to anyone else? So perhaps, Benoit, you could address that first question, please.
Yeah, so I think, we are really looking at the regulation and the task as they are defined, right? So in that sense, the oversight of the health of the network is a CAA or competent authority task. So that's why it will be up to us as FOCA in Switzerland to make sure this happens. Now, the beauty of those tests, if you take network remote ID, is that you can run it, and I didn't have time to mention that, but you can run that against all the participants, not only yourself, right? Because then what's the point? You know that your service is working.
Right.
What's interesting is the other also working. And so in that sense, it's not only available to ANSPs, but it's available to everybody in the network. And so again, when you make a change, you want to make sure you don't break yourself, but you don't break others also, right? And so, yeah, in that sense, absolutely, it will be available to everybody.
Thank you, Benoit. And but you've got this open source code, and you talked about the Linux Foundation in your presentation slide. How can we trust the open source code provided? Any thoughts on that? Because at the end of the day, it's all critical data, critical decision making is going to take place based on it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mentioned the governance, and so in that sense, we have some transparency in who decides and who are the stakeholders, and so that we get. But what I didn't mention, and thank you for pointing it out, actually it was missing, is that there's also as part of this structure provided in the Linux Foundation, a technical board. So what we've seen recently, I can it was JLog, I can't remember the name, this attack through open source. And you want to avoid that. And so absolutely, you need a technical board, people who are doing the same work as we do on the governance side, making sure that the code is good, that it follows the best practices, that it's open and transparent also, and so that not anything comes in. And yes, you need the two for the system to function when it comes to open source and at very high level. So the barrier to entry, in the technical board is high. You need to really prove that you understand the system. There's a whole process. You have to be a contributor yourself and so forth.
Okay, and a quick one just arrived. I think it's to do with the terminology in the presentation. What does onboarding mean? Could you highlight that just so that a number of people are asking about it?
Well, that's a good point. Actually, it's just that moment where, as a USSP, you come to a CAA and ask for, being part of the national U-Space network. And so at that moment, you have, at least 3 steps, which is the agreement among USSP you have to sign, the agreement with the ANSP that you have to sign, and the CIS, the provision and stuff like that. So this is what we understand by onboarding. Maybe there's a better way of characterizing it, but right now this is how we refer to it.
All right, thank you very much, Benoit. Let's move on to Pasi now. Pasi, thank you for sharing your approach in Finland, and particularly in the region of Oulu, on integrating drones in controlled airspace. Now, should there be more free flight arrangements for manned and unmanned traffic than the drone corridors? Because you talked about the drone corridors, or even the temporary designated areas. Any views on that?
Yes, thank you. The drone corridors and the temporary areas are quite, tied up solutions. So if you have a drone corridor from point A to point B, then you have only that corridor. And then if someone wants to fly something else, then you have to make a new corridor. And that's really time taking, and it's not any, free flight. So there would be also this, what do you say? It's the dynamic airspace reconfiguration, but that's something which really needs to study how that's done. Can you have drones in the south side of the airport if you have a VFR plane or helicopter in north side of the airport? We also, of course, need a UTM solution. So in this particular project, we are proud to have the exponent companies from Emirates, the Astra UTM solution, via which we can then show for the ATCOs and other airspace users also where the drones are, where the other traffic is. So we need this kind of digital solutions for this, but to get it more open for everyone to fly, we really need to study it a little bit. So I really hope that we could end up in a world where we don't need the corridor. Maybe we need some designated points where you enter the airport area or the control zone. But of course, for more free flights, we need more free airspace and more dedicated and advanced solutions.
Okay. And how is the situation with drone registrations today? And are all the drone users registered already?
Not yet. We had from the CAA last year, we had a rough number that there's roughly 50,000 drone operators in Finland, maybe even 60,000 at the moment, because more and more people are having drones. Most of those are not the commercial operators, but hobbyists, etc. But we have now something like 14,500 to 15,000 registrations. So we are lacking at least two-thirds of the operators to register. So we need more registrations to show for everyone and offer to everyone the same data. So when everyone has the same data, then it's more safe for all.
Indeed. A couple of quick questions that have come through. First of all, for the benefit of all the members who are listening in, all these presentation slides and a recording of the entire event will be made available on the homepage of a European network of U-Space stakeholders after this event, either before the end of today or certainly by tomorrow morning. So you will have access to all of them. And also the last slide we will show today will contain the email IDs of all the presenters, including myself. So if you take a note of those, if you have any detailed questions that we can't cover in the webinar because we have limited time, you're more than welcome to approach any of those presenters and therefore also get your answers that way. So a quick one to you. Well, first of all, I think you mentioned, Pasi, that there are many challenges that you're facing, and one of those is the separation between drones and manned traffic, and what's enough and what's too much, and where's the optimum level as such. And I know Thorsten also mentioned it, that there is a wonderful Cesar-funded project called Icarus that's running. They are making a lot of progress on looking at the separation between various airspace users. So for those of you who don't know about it, please do go there and have a look see what they're doing. There's a question from Italy about which and how many airspace integration, drone integration and airspace, ATM, UTM integration projects that are ongoing in Europe and in particularly in Italy. That's a very good question. Now, let me take that question to highlight on what we are doing at EUROCONTROL, along with EASA, European Commission, and Cesar Joint Undertaking. We are currently running a very large survey with all the member states across EU, and we're asking them, no doubt, about the maturity of their use-based service implementation, but we're also asking them to highlight to us which projects they're running in their respective state, whether they are state-funded, Cesar-funded, Horizon 2020 funded. That will give us a pretty conclusive list of projects, their purpose, their timeline and mission that they are running in individual member state countries. We plan to finish that survey on the 4th of April, and by the Q3 of this year, we plan to publish a report. And I think, quite frankly, although it's a long wait for you, that will be a conclusive piece of information that you will obtain, and it will be available to every one of those. So I think it'll be difficult to inform and highlight to you how many of those projects are running in Italy right now. It'll be quite difficult, but we will get the right information, verified, validated information, and bring it back to you. Let's move on to Thorsten now. Thorsten, thank you for providing your view on how to help the use of drones in an enterprise itself. When you introduce, I mean, it's quite interesting, at the same time quite daunting, but when you introduce your solution in a control center to your clients, what are they most surprised about when they hear this solution? Could you share with us on the reaction of your clients, please?
Sure. Yeah, what they're really surprised about is that how integrate this of a workflow this really allows. If you align both USSP processes together with your own control center, and that's what. So they look forward to using drones for their business challenges, but they need a tool which supports them, and something that facilitates integration with existing systems or processes, and all of this needs to be done in an efficient way, because that's what everybody's looking for. So a challenge comes along with that, though, when enterprises, they're very used to, they expect to have automation in one degree or another. This is what things are like. The thought of robots and automated support on the ground, it's not at all foreign to them. They want to extend that ease and the power of such approaches to drones. And they really have great expectations regarding this. As I said, I have many client talks along those lines. And say in security, they need an intelligent eye in the sky over their own property, or in inspections, they want to keep people out of harm's way, or also want to get better repeatable results for predictive maintenance and so forth. So then you have to explain to them, no, well, it's not as easy as you think it is, because you're all of a sudden operating an aircraft. You need to train people to be pilots. You need to obtain permissions. And then they'll say, well, but I'm above my chemical plant, my facility. All I want to do is push a button and get results, right? So there's a bit of a learning curve, you could say, but also a hindrance for adoption in that way.
Yeah, it must be. It must be, and I think it must be a challenge, because it's a cultural thing. We've done things in one way and it's always worked. Now you're asking us to change, and I think in that respect, how do you then bridge the challenge? Because on one hand, you've got the automated system, and you've got all these essentially run a fleet of flying robots as such, and on the other hand, you have to interface with the aviation world. It's almost like there are two cultures of this world. And how do you bridge that challenge? I know there's no magic wand or a magic answer, but perhaps you could share what your experience has been to bridge that gap, please.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is we really know both worlds, and we have a variety of computer and hardware engineers in our team. We have communication network specialists. We have machine learning and AI experts. We have professional drone pilots, interface designers, geoscientists, but also experts that are familiar with drone regulations, and safety engineers on board. We have security logistics experts and people who have run large projects in manned aircraft maintenance and refitting, as well as pilots, from A320 pilots to general aviation, and a number of partners. And when you have such a diverse team, and couple this with the experiences we have obtained by interfacing with a wide variety of stakeholders and subject matter experts to work in this research project, that really quite uniquely positions us to assist clients to address this challenge, and that aids in bridging that gap, right? And so we can support them with our consulting service, and doesn't, however, it does, however, take, like I said, educational efforts, and that's not so easy. So making these drone deployments into these industry sectors, to make them active and make them user-friendly from a practical regulatory standpoint, make that easier, that would be much appreciated, and would really bring along adoption. Right? So.
Indeed. Very much so. A closed question from one of the attendees is the video that you just shown in your presentation, is that available on your website, or can it be made available, please?
Yeah, I don't know that it's on our website, but we have it on our LinkedIn channel, and I can look up the link maybe in the meantime and post it as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Thorsten. A couple of new questions have just come for Benoit. Benoit, one of those is actually it's a couple, more than one people who are asking for it. What happens with the result of the oversight data that's gathered through the testing framework that you highlighted. What happens to that data? Does that go to the CAA? Who maintains it and who controls that?
Yeah, so this is a very important point. And again, our goal as the CAA is not to be too involved, right? Simply because the main mistake you can do when it comes to data is gathering them for the sake of gathering them. We all know what happens. It's a waste of time for everybody. Yeah. So the way we're looking at it now, but definitely this is something that we're investigating, is that the tests are run by the participants to the network, and then they are available on demand as part of our oversight functions, audits, and others. So again, I think this is the way we look at it now. But so there's no idea of spreading them somewhere or something like that. We want to keep it simple. Let's see how simple we can go. And then, make it a little bit more sophisticated if it needs to be.
Yes, I understand that, because the famous phrase, keeping data for the sake of keeping data is just going to consume effort, but actually not going to give you any benefit, which is why the other question is the discovery and synchronization service that you talked about, is it run by FOCA?
Oh, yeah. So this is a very and deeper question. If you're familiar with the ASTM standards that we use for data exchange, this is the key function that allows you to actually know which data you need to access as a USSP. So, I'm operating here. Who else should I contact? And so a part of that is this discovery and synchronization service. And this is done by USSPs. What we expect to do is that each USSP will be required to either, have this capability or to procure it, so that everybody, is able to get the data. So in theory, you could have only one participant doing it, but again, here we need to think about the robustness of the system. And so that's why it's important that, this is a shared effort by USSPs. So a very important, very interesting point. Thank you for mentioning it.
Okay, and the last one, I think, is probably more of a closed question, and I think it applies to all member states, really, is when does Switzerland, or the FOCA in this case, when do you expect to see that the use-based services mandated in the regulation, the use-based regulation 664, when will Switzerland be ready for it?
Yeah. So, I think we did a little statistical exercise in the team. We have, certification. There is with certification, there are, challenges linked to a designation of use-based airspaces. And if you have like a 20% chance of getting delayed in each of the 4 or 5 main activities you have, well, you end up with a pretty high likelihood to get delayed. But still, we're optimistic by nature, and we really aim to be ready as soon as the regulation is taking over in Switzerland. I think the technical perspective won't be the main challenge because we were able to start working on it early. But, like dynamic airspace reconfiguration, there are a lot of questions. Econspicuity, it's not, we still have a lot of questions. So our goal is really early 2023. We're working toward that goal. But again, I think we will need to see in reality what this means. But still, as I mentioned, optimistic.
Yes, it's indeed. And I think I've not in this webinar, but in the normal job, I've spoken to a number of other member states about the same question. And because of the different environment in different member states, they're all operating at they're all aiming for the same goal, but coming from a different perspective, and are running at a different speed. It doesn't surprise me at all. Doesn't surprise me. Over to you, Pasi. There's a couple of questions just come up. One which is very technical, and that's related to your presentation. It's that, is the local QNH sufficiently accurate, especially with buildings? Now, your piece of work is in Oulu, and you're trying to go from there to the islands just west of Oulu. So certainly there are buildings within the city of Oulu, because it's quite a big city, a key city, but across the waters, there's not much of an issue. But is there, how does a local QNH sufficiently provide that sort of accuracy. Any thoughts on that, please?
Well, as you said, it's a bit of a technical question, and that's why we have the research centers with us. So I'm not capable of answering that. I've answered only that the inside the drone corridor, if the upper limit is 400 feet, so I don't really actually care as an ATCO how the drone operators will fulfill to be inside or stay inside the corridor. If we publish that up to 400 feet, we expect everyone to maintain or stay inside the corridor. But of course, you are correct, and the one who raised the question on how about the buildings, etc., or ships over the sea area, how do you keep the separation for those? And then again, it's a question of segregation, what is enough then. But this is something I will leave for the VTT research and all the university to answer.
So maybe I can recommend the lady or the gentleman who asked this question to send an email directly to Pasi, and he'll connect you with the people who are researching. I can tell you that there is a task force ongoing at the moment where they are looking to generate a common altitude reference system known as CARS, and they're looking at various aspects. The challenges are clear now. It's a case of finding the solutions, and I know that EUROCONTROL, my organization, is involved, so is EASA for that matter, and a number of other organizations. So there is work going on it, because it's a common problem that we're going to face across every member state. Thorsten, last one or two questions, then we'll wrap up really. One of which is that, are there any elements from the work you guys have done with your client in Hamburg that you feel that EASA can benefit from and they can take on board to improve the regulation in future?
Yeah, we are giving this thought and again and again. We'll take an afternoon to speak more about that. I think we'll have some more discussions on that, hopefully in the context of Amsterdam. It's a very broad subject, of course.
It is.
I think I'm hard pressed to answer this very concisely, I must be honest.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. I think we've got some more questions as well. So apologies to those where we couldn't capture all their questions, but we've tried to be as best as we can, keep them generic, covering a number of them. We're approaching that magical time of that webinar, only a couple of minutes left, so let me do the wrap up now. I'd first like to thank my speakers who have come out and openly shared their lessons that they've learned from their day-to-day work. I think the purpose of those lessons was not just to provide solutions, but also to trigger some questions, because there are still very open questions that we all need to work together. There are still challenges that we need to address. And I hope that the members of the audience will recognize that, it's not just you facing those challenges. I think there's a number of similar organizations across Europe facing those. So thank you for highlighting the challenges with ATM, UTM integration, Pasi, and the work you guys are doing in Finland, and your approach to get it right in one region and then to roll it out across the entire nation. Thanks to Benoit for sharing your proposal for a testing framework to try and take the manual things away from oversight activities of CAAs for USSP certification. No doubt there are benefits. I think they're fairly clear. Based on the questions I can see, there is a lot of interest. I don't think we've heard the last of this. I expect that we will hear more of it during the Amsterdam Drone Week as well. And Thorsten, thanks for providing us a view as a solution provider on how to make things more efficient and safe by using technology frameworks in a control center, and how that can help to manage and control a number of drones that will provide benefits to the client, in this case, the Hamburg, but it can also be any other client, any other enterprise that's looking to use drones for surveillance purposes, inspection purposes and so on. So again, I don't think we've heard the last of it as well, because I feel that this enterprise model is very important going forward. Perhaps the enterprise model might even be slightly easier to create a generic business case of it, where we can actually see what the figures are on where the benefits on efficiency and safety are to be achieved. So thank you very much for all those. And a last minute reminder to all of you that on the 28th of March, we will hold our physical meeting of the U-Space network of U-Space stakeholders. An email will go out to you. Please use that email, and there'll be a link in there, a code in there for a free voucher for accessing the entire week of Amsterdam Drone Week, but the tickets are limited. So I'd encourage that when you see that email, please register as soon as possible. The Amsterdam Drone Week will run from the 29th to 31st. And based on the last we've heard, it is still going to be a physical event. I know it was changed earlier due to COVID concerns. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar, the first of this year. And depending on what the COVID situation is like, we will either have more physical meetings, which is indeed our preferred way, because I think it gets to talk to people and brainstorm issues in a much better way. But if that does become a problem, we will continue to share our lessons and lessons of our members with you via webinars. Please write to us if you have any questions about this webinar or anything in future. I wish you all the very best in implementing U-Space. I really think that Europe now is on a fast track. It is certainly the region around the world that's moving the quickest in implementing U-Space. So there's a lot to look forward to. You see on the screen the email IDs of all the webinar presenters and the moderators. So please use any of those email IDs to reach out to us. I wish you a pleasant day and thank you for being with us. Goodbye. Over to you, Janos.
Goodbye.
Munish, thank you very much for moderating this event. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the journey for today. Thank you for attending this webinar. We do hope that you enjoyed it. A kind reminder though, please take a moment and fill in the feedback questionnaire. Goodbye wherever you are.